I thought we'd talk with Christopher Hajec, who's director of litigation. He's a lawyer with the Immigration Reform Law Institute. Christopher, good to have you back on the program. What's IRLI going to do, and what is the state of Texas going to do specifically to go after these crazy policies Biden has pushed forward?
Thank you, Lars. Most recently, we've just sued Texas. We've just sued Biden. Texas has, with IRLI representing them, our group representing Texas, over this COVID border surge, where Biden changed all the policies that Trump had, mainly that he was just turning everybody back at the border because for health reasons, and sending them back into Mexico. And now Biden's letting all these people in, putting them in crowded conditions where they can spread COVID, and then releasing them. They end up getting put on buses with bus tickets and sent to, a city of their choice, Houston, New York, wherever.
Or airlines.
And yes. And that is certainly going to prolong and increase the pandemic and hurt people's health and also the ability of states like Texas to reopen and get their economies going and their kids back in school. And none of that was considered by the administration. And when it changed all these rules, and it didn't give any reason at all for why it was doing it. It seems that senseless, and that's actually a legal problem.
Yeah, let me ask you something. Usually when lawyers go to court and they sue on behalf of anybody against anybody, what they're looking for is a remedy. Oftentimes they'll talk about being made whole. So if somebody comes and knocks down my fence with their car and it does $1,000 damage, I go to court and say, hey, you got to fix my fence, pay me $1,000. In this case, what's the remedy that you're asking for in the lawsuit or on behalf of the state of Texas against the Biden administration? Because how do you total up the cost of all of this to the state and to all the other states?
Yeah. Yes, the cost is very great. The problem is you can't get money damages from the federal government. So the remedy asked for is a court order that they have to return to the Trump-era policies, which were keeping the country a lot safer.
Let me ask you, if you get that remedy, and how quickly can we get it? Because we've got ongoing damage that's going on right now. I'm sure you're making the argument that you can't decide this 6 months from now because the damage will be not only incalculable, but you've got real harm that's happening, not just to Texas, but to other states, if a judge doesn't act very quickly. How quickly do you think you can get the courts to act on this?
Pretty quickly. We've asked for a preliminary injunction, and that has to be briefed. And those briefing cycles are quick, a couple weeks maybe, and then the court issues its decision. And that a preliminary injunction would stay in place while the case went on.
Now, let me ask you a legal question, Christopher. I'm talking to Christopher Hajec from IRLI, which is the Immigration Law Reform Institute, which is a great organization. I don't have a dog in the fight in this, except that I believe in enforcing America's immigration laws. If you get them to do this, what's the likelihood the Biden administration will pay any attention? Because I've noticed that during the Trump years, the 4 years of Donald Trump, a federal court judge in Hawaii or some far-flung place would say, hey, Trump's got a new policy and I've decided it's unconstitutional, and one judge gets to shut it down, and it would shut down for the entire country. Things like the cases involving the terror-sponsoring nations and the travel ban on people coming from those countries. Those things got slammed into place very quickly. But I've also noticed that lately the Biden administration seemed to be just ignoring federal court rulings, saying, well, fine, thanks. You decided that, Judge. We're not doing it.
Yes. In the recent deportation pause case that Texas brought, they got a temporary restraining order and then a preliminary injunction. And the next step was for Judge Tipton, who issued the injunction, to demand that the administration give him the names of people who had ordered agents not to comply. And that is how these things are enforced. When he finds out who they are, they had better start enforcing it, or they will be in contempt of court. and that can result in jail.
So a judge could go after somebody individually. I mean, he doesn't have an army or a police force or anything like that, but he could say, I'm finding Joe Schmo over here who wrote this policy. He's in contempt of court, and then he's facing some personal consequences, right?
Yes, indeed.
Are you expecting that kind of decision from the judge? And what's the Biden administration going to say in defense of this policy?
I have no idea what they will say in defense of it. Of all these policies, that they will try to deny that they have them as much as they can, but most of them are in writing, very briefly. And for instance, Trump was sending asylum claimants back to wait in Mexico for their asylum hearings,
right?
And instead of releasing them here, and Biden just stopped doing that. He didn't give any reason for it. They just issued a press release saying we're not going to do that anymore. We're not following this policy. Well, that's a valid regulation that has the force of law. So that's contrary to law, and you can't just change it without explaining it. And so I don't know how many of these things will be defended at all.
Well, and in fact, during Trump, wasn't there at least one case that I recall vaguely where the courts effectively said to the Trump administration, you have to explain why you changed this policy. And when the court found the explanation lacking or wanting, that the court said that's not a good enough reason the policy is gone. And they could reverse that way. And in fact, they even referred to statements that had been made by Donald Trump publicly. Are they going to do the same kind of thing with Joe Biden and say this is a guy who went through an entire campaign promising to open up the border and to allow people to come in and opposing the stay in Mexico policy? Will the court look at those things as well and do the same thing? In other words, is Biden going to be held to the same standard that Donald Trump was?
I certainly hope so, and I think that's a very valid way for a court to proceed. He made many statements, and the case against Trump was the one about DACA that he. They tried to rescind it. And it was a pretty extreme application by Chief Justice Roberts of the arbitrary and capricious standard. And they did explain why they did it, but he said that wasn't enough. Here it's even easier. Biden has not explained why they're doing these things, and it just does look like it's because they want to open the border.
Yeah, and it also looks like Mayorkas and others have been doing everything they can to avoid taking any kind of action that would dissuade people from coming into the country. Christopher, keep up the good work at IRLI, and we appreciate your time on a Friday night.
Sure thing.
Thank you very much. That's Christopher Hajec.